Let's go back to the Coca-Cola inaugural Olympic example. I had committed to my manager that I would generate $1 million in royalty revenue.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Highlight, a business podcast for business people. And today I've got a brand new friend on the show, Pete Canalichio. And let me tell you why I'm laughing about that. Pete and I were talking beforehand, and he's got a little bit of an Italian last name. And Pete set me up here with an incredible impression that I'm not going to share or make him do on the show. You'll have to catch him in Georgia sometime, and maybe he'll do it for you. But Pete is the owner of BrandAlive. And I'm excited to talk all things branding and a little bit of marketing with you today, Pete. Man, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chandler. I'm really excited to be here. And yeah, I'm happy to tell anyone face to face how to pronounce my name if you were in Italy, but we'll stick with Canlichio.
Canlichio. It was there's so many syllables in there. It's the end of the day. It was a recipe for disaster. I'm not a pro at this, obviously. I need some more media training, but I'm excited you're here, man. And I'd love for you to just take a couple minutes here and tell everybody a little bit about your journey, because you and I talked, and I know that it's a unique one, and I'd love to see how you ended up as a brand expert.
Yeah, I'd love to share it. And mine is definitely a circuitous route, I would say. I'm a Naval Academy grad, and I'd like to say, thankfully, my eyesight was good at the time. So I was able to choose the least, uh, I guess, difficult path, which was to become a Navy pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that hunting submarines, primarily Soviet submarines at the time. And then when my time came up and I had a choice to make, I said, you know what, instead of becoming an airline pilot, I think there's other things I should be doing. And probably the best way to do that is go to business school. And so I went to UNC Chapel Hill, Keenan Flagler Business School, studied finance because I was good at math, and ended up landing a job at the Coca-Cola company, which brought me to Atlanta. I was a financial analyst for a couple of years, loved working with the European group, the Italian division, which was really fun. I got to practice my Italian and the Benelux countries in the UK. And then after that, I got invited by the treasurer of the company to help them manage their debt portfolio. And then even got to trade some commercial paper, which basically means borrow money from 1 day to 30 days. It's a sophisticated name for just that, simple short-term borrowing. And then I got an opportunity to be in charge of international cash operations in London, which is a phenomenal city. That did not last long enough. I was only there for a year, came back to Atlanta. And then that's when I said, hey, you know what? I'm kind of bored crunching numbers. I'd like to see if I can go hang out with the marketers and the brand folks, because they seem to be having a lot more fun. And so they gave me permission to talk to somebody that was heading up a group called Business Affairs, which was all around sponsorship negotiation. And she took a liking to me and said, hey, come and join my team, bring your business acumen to helping us be smarter when we negotiate with Major League Baseball, the National Hockey League, all these places. They typically want to sell us a sign and tickets. And while tickets are important because we can host those to clients, bring them in, pretty much everyone knows who Coca-Cola is. So a sign is not really that helpful. But what we really are interested in is being able to use their brand assets in the marketplace. And so that's when I got hooked. It was like, okay, why would we want to use their brand assets? Well, they have a core group of fans. And if those fans are connected in some way with the Coca-Cola brand, maybe there's an opportunity to think about supporting the local team, maybe like the Atlanta Braves, around a viewing experience and drinking Coca-Cola, a very family-oriented product for a very family-oriented sport. So I kind of fell in love with that and did that for a year before I got hand-plucked out of that group to head up a group called Event Merchandising, which was part of worldwide licensing. And I didn't know anything about licensing at the time. I was like, that sounds like a very technical term, and it is. Really, the definition is it's a fancy word for renting. So you rent a physical feature, a physical thing, like you can rent a home or rent a car. Well, when you rent a brand, the term they use is licensing, and that's the difference. But it's essentially the same thing. And so we were renting out our brand, licensing out our brand to put on different products for people to buy. So think about like maybe there's like Christmas ornaments or hats or T-shirts or even like flip-flops. And what they wanted me to do was combine that with some of these major sponsored events like the Olympic Games and FIFA World Cup Championships and NASCAR events. And so we would take our brand, combine it with the Olympic brand, and create a composite brand. So now we're inextricably linked. And so when a fan were to buy that Olympic piece of memorabilia and it's hooked with Coca-Cola, now they've paid us a royalty. They've basically given us money to put that product in their home, and it could effectively become, a keepsake, right? So I buy an Olympic pin set for the Nagano Olympic Games. It got Coca-Cola on it. I paid money to the Coca-Cola company and to the Olympic Committee, and I'm keeping it in my home, and I have warm memories of that event that I've been able to preserve. And so that's where I fell in love with brands. I left there after 10 years. I was part of a reorganization, but that was a great opportunity because it gave me the chance to work on the 2004 Global Olympic Torch Relay. I went around the world with the Olympic Torch, 27 countries, 33 cities in 35 days. I wouldn't recommend it, but I'd say it was exhilarating and exhausting. And I have a journal to prove that I've gone. And one day maybe there will be a book out there about that experience. But after that, I got recruited to work for the Knoll Rubbermaid company, now called Knoll Brands, running Rubbermaid's global licensing business. So now, instead of Coca-Cola using it as a marketing tool, Rubbermaid was using it as a way of a business operational tool where they said, we are experts in certain categories where we can create products for storage in an organization, typically made out of rubber or plastic. But there's a whole lot of other categories that we should be in, but we just don't know how to do it. And so we should get help. And in some cases, we used to know how to do it, but we're not good at it anymore. So here's a quick example. We Rubbermaid, created the spatula or the turner. But when that category got very, I would say, SKU intensive, in other words, they went from like 5 different products for the kitchen to like 500. You can think about, just like things to peel your vegetables. There could be like 10 versions of it, right? It got too complicated for the Rubbermaid, Knoll Rubbermaid. And so we actually found a company that was expert in that, and they rented our brand, licensed our brand, and did it way better than we could. And they paid us a royalty, and we were able to stay in that category where we belonged, and people loved having us Rubbermaid branded kitchen tools and gadgets. And that way we were supporting the brand and making revenue, which was supportive for the shareholders. So that's and then fast forward to the global recession of 2009. I found myself on the outside looking in again, and I said, okay, here's an opportunity for me to take everything I've learned about branding, brand expansion, brand licensing, and help others with that. And so I started up my own company back in 2009, and 15 years later, here we are.
Man, I'm over here writing feverishly because it's such a, I mean, and I already knew the story, but the background is still so incredible how he went from like Navy pilot, hunting Russian subs to, nerd with a bunch of spreadsheets to like now you're involved with the biggest brand in the world as like a brand licensing expert to now even Rubbermaid and now doing your own thing. Now you're an entrepreneur. You might be in contention for the most interesting man alive at this point, Pete. I don't know.
I don't know. It's either a blessing or a curse, but I tried to look at it a glass half full mentality and say, I get to do something different, and that's pretty cool.
Well, it's interesting, man, and we talked about this beforehand, but I want to run it back a little bit, and I kind of want to walk through your story some to unpack what we can really learn, because I think that you have a very unique brand eye that a lot of people don't. A lot of people in the branding space that I've met go to school for graphic design, very traditional, very artisty type, and then they over the decades hone their craft by working on different brands and different things, and you've come at it from almost the exact opposite end, very analytical, very thought first, and then kind of trying to find the emotion to stuff. So going back to some of the Coca-Cola stuff really quickly. So they're licensing their product out, and I'm just curious. And so I want to make sure I understand this correctly. So
Sure.
essentially, Coke is this massive brand. This other company whether it be the Olympics or whomever, is saying, hey, we want to leverage Coke's brand within our own products. And so that's why they're paying a licensing deal in that to try to help sell more products, or how does that work?
Yeah, so great question. And let me give you an example with the Nagano Olympics. So and it's funny, you talked about the idea of what I was trying to do. And I remember just quickly when I first joined the worldwide licensing team and they said head of event merchandising, I looked at my budget and I said, okay, to my boss, I'm like, hey, I've got money for all our salaries. It was a small team before. I've got money for travel, but I don't have anything else. How am I going to do this? Like, I didn't really know what I was doing. And, but she believed in me anyway. And she said, listen, Pete, I'm giving you the Coca-Cola brand. And I was like, oh yeah, it's the world's, most valuable brand at the time. And it was incredible how much that by itself, we'd say, hey, you want to make a product, pay us a royalty to make a product that you have the capability of doing. Would that be interesting? And almost everyone said yes. So the way it worked was, and what we were doing is the Olympics, they have their own licensing business. So they are creating, companies come to them and say, hey, I want to make keychains, or I want to make collectible cards, or lapel pins. I'll pay you, and typically the licensing rate for the Olympics is higher. I don't know what it is, but let's say it's about 15%. I'll be happy to pay you that. And what we were saying to the Olympic Committee is, what we want to do is create an extra revenue stream for you and for us. We're going to create Coca-Cola Olympic merchandise. It will be uniquely different than the Olympic merchandise you're selling. And so therefore it will be additive. And the reason it'll be additive is we have a whole different set of people who love the Coca-Cola brand that may not be really that interested in the Olympic brand, but we can bring them in, and that way we'll get a physical presence with these categories of merchandise at the event and around the event, but we'll also be able to memorialize the event. And what you have to do is just simply hold out your hand and we'll pay you. We'll split the royalty that we get and put it into your bank account. And that was interesting to them once they understood, and they realized the Coca-Cola brand was massive and that the audience was probably uniquely different. So we would not be cannibalizing their sales. And so the companies that rent the brands are called licensees, and the licensee is required to pay the royalty on the wholesale cost of the goods to the licensor, who is the brand owner. So Coca-Cola and the Olympic Committee.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So how are you guys back then, and even now with BrandAlive and the different companies that you're helping consult with at this point? Like, how do you decide who you want to associate your brand with and who you should probably stay away from? Because money, as it turns out, is fairly easy to access, and that's not always the delineator. And so there's a lot of emotion that goes into it, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, I thank you for that question. I love that question, and it's a lot of what I do to help my clients, because you're right. And let's go back to the Coca-Cola Nagano Olympic example. I had committed to my manager that I would generate $1 million in royalty revenue for that event. And while we were setting up the program and figuring out what categories to go into, we got approached by a company that made lighters. And they said, this was Japan, right? In Japan at the time, there was a lot of people smoking cigarettes in there. And they said, hey, we will pay you a minimum guaranteed royalty of $1 million if you let us sell lighters that have the Coca-Cola and the Nagano Olympic brand on them. And I was like, wow, ka-ching, right? Like I made my budget, and if they do any better than they think, we're going to make even more than that. We might make 2 times that. Of course, right as that idea came to my mind, I thought, I'm going to be a hero. I said, there's no way it's ever going to happen, because I would be creating $1 million in incremental revenue for the company while losing probably $1 billion in brand equity, because the brand did not stand for cancer-causing products, right? It stood for fun and authenticity and great taste and memorable moments. And so what I try to help my clients do is, and I wrote about this in a book that I published in 2018 called Expand, Grow, Thrive, where I co-authored a model called Lasso with a gentleman named Mark DeSoma, who's a great brand strategist out of Wellington, New Zealand, where the model stands for lateral, addictive, storied, scalable, and ownable, the 5 metrics of a brand. And we said, based on those, you can determine whether your brand is expandable or not. And then you can figure out whether to expand on your own, license it into a category, or acquire a company. But the thing that you need to understand first is the brand expansion point. We coined this phrase, the brand expansion point, which we said, what is the key emotion that the brand is connecting with the consumer on? And based on that emotion, pivot into all the categories that reinforce that emotion, but avoid any category that does something opposite of that emotion. And on occasion, you may be able to play in areas that are neutral if the opportunity is right and it doesn't provide any detrimental side effects, any unintended consequences. Then you can go there. But in the case clearly with the Nagano Olympics, the brand expansion point was around probably warm memories, or great bringing unity to the world, things like that. And it wasn't about anything related to lighting cigarettes. And so we had to avoid that like the plague. And that's how I try to help my clients go. You may be able to go into that category. Somebody may be willing to pay you a royalty, a licensee, and a minimum guaranteed royalty to boot. But should you be going in that category? Because it could actually be could erode your brand instead of adding to your brand.
What are some of the questions you ask around that, the whether we should or we shouldn't? Because I could make an argument both ways. Zippo lighters, for instance, are very popular collectible items that aren't just all about lighting up death sticks, but that would be bad imagery. I do agree with that, but it's a nuanced contextual thing. So, like, what are some of the questions that you end up working with your clients on to determine what the right opportunities are and what the wrong ones are?
Yeah, so great question. And the way I think about it first is to really understand the brand. And so a lot of my clients, I'm actually helping them develop their brand strategy. I'm saying, okay, tell me about your brand story. What are the key inflection points of that story? What is your brand architecture, starting with what are the beliefs? What are your values? What are your brand's attributes? What are your brand's functional benefits? What are your brand's emotional benefits? What's the brand's core message? What's the brand's promise? And then finally, what's the brand's positioning? Who's the target audience at a very rich level? Like, not only, maybe it's there's some demographic aspects or some psychographic aspects, but what are the attitudes or the beliefs of these people? What are their values? And then what is it that they need? What is the problem that they have that you are going to solve, and why are you better than your competition? And what are the metrics to prove that you're better? And so when we look at all that, we're like, when you get back to the architecture piece, right? Beliefs, values, attributes, functional benefits, emotional benefits. So if we know what the emotional benefits are, and I always like to key on that because those are the things that are most compelling. What are the emotions, the core emotion that the brand creates? And so I would say, why don't we focus on that core emotion or emotions that the brand is associated with, and reinforce it through a category of merchandise that can help build that brand in that space. And like I said, there are opportunities where you could go into a neutral space, and like, let's say a neutral space in the sense that the emotions aren't reinforcing, but maybe it opens up a new whole category or new region, a new market, and it's not hurting your brand. Then I would say there's probably a good reason to do that. But if you can reinforce those emotions, and again, using Coca-Cola as the example, where it's around warm memories or with family or friends, what are the categories that can help you create those warm memories? Those are the key categories you want to be in.
Yeah. Do you have a time where somebody just they answered all the questions and it definitely pointed them towards avoiding this licensing opportunity, and they said we're going to do it anyways, and it just didn't work out, and they should have listened to the questions on the front end?
Oh my, for sure. There were examples even when I was at Rubbermaid where I walked into a little bit of a can of worms where we were in categories that were purely done for very short-term reasons. I on occasion, right, some senior manager may need to hit a certain number in order to hit his bonus or her bonus. And so the beauty about licensing is if you have a minimum guaranteed royalty that the licensee is going to pay you, that pretty much drops to the bottom line. So if you had an operational income level that you needed to reach, that could do it. But unfortunately, in some instances, it was just creating so much confusion where it was like, okay, you say the brand is around storage and organization and basically empowering moms to be to have pride in their home, right? Because everything is in its place. And by the way, all of those containers, they look really fresh and they look fun, and they make my home, they make me feel proud of my home, right? But if you're out there, doing stuff around, maybe garden hedging or things like that, have nothing to do with the home per se, then you're probably in a category that you shouldn't be in. And the likelihood of it even being successful is pretty low because it's just kind of out there on an island.
Yeah, this isn't a leadership podcast, but it definitely, the first thing that flew in my mind when you said that was humans will always optimize for the thing they're rewarded for. And unfortunately, if the short-term reward is like, I got to hit this quarterly bonus, then, it's not my brand long-term, and bad operators can go out of their way to do what's best for them in the short run versus, great top-down leadership is all about like, hey, this is what it means to be like us. And if you go against that, then you don't get to be here anymore. And maybe they ended up not getting it or not, but like, that's crazy that unfortunately, all that brand equity came up from Rubbermaid and was just thrown away in pursuit of some short-term goal for them. But what about on the other side of that? What about on the, like, this collaboration, this licensing agreement worked out way better than anybody thought, or maybe it's your favorite one of all time?
I have to. So here's an example, a fun, great example with Rubbermaid, because I think this is one of the best ones. So at the time, Rubbermaid was the Rubbermaid commercial products was making a dump cart, a garden dumping cart, right? Like a one wheel, the typical traditional dump cart, and so that was something that they was heavy built. The rubber plastic coating was impenetrable. It was going to last 100 years, right? But a company came to us and they said, hey, we have an upgrade to the dumping cart. We have what they call a garden cart where it had four wheels that were inflated. Typically, dump carts have like a hard, solid wheel. These were inflated wheels with ball bearings. So it was really easy to pull. Like you could see a little person, a child, or even a petite woman being able to pull it, and it would hold up to 800 pounds of cargo. And the neat thing about it was that in addition to it being easily movable, it had this little lever where you could pull it up, and the one axle would move towards the center of the body of the cart, which then created a natural fulcrum. So the cart full would tip over exactly where you wanted it to, and the cart can, what was in the cart would dump exactly where you wanted it to. And we loved it, and we thought this is the coolest thing ever. And so we were approached by this company, and they wanted to license the Rubbermaid brand. They thought it would be perfect, and they wanted to put it into Costco stores. And so we had to first go to the folks that were making the dumping cart and say, hey, listen, yours is a commercial product item. This is a consumer product. We don't think we're competing. And they said, okay, fine, but we need to evaluate the plastic container because we want to make sure it will do the job. And it turned out their plastic was thinner than what Rubbermaid was using, but also turned out to be more flexible and actually of a higher quality. So we loved that. We loved every aspect of it. And we put it into Costco stores, our licensee did. And they sold, I think, 50 or 60,000 of them in a very short period of time. So they made money, and Rubbermaid a lot of money. And on top of that, everybody had these carts. And they had a phenomenal experience because they were able to, make them work in their home and in their gardens and achieve all the things they needed to with them. and they would last a long time. So we just saw it as such a a grand slam because everybody participated in improving their bottom line, and these carts stayed with the consumer, which we know they love them. We heard they love them, which also enhanced the quality of the brand. So that's one of my, and I wanted one of those. I didn't get it, but anyway, that's between me and my boss at the time, but it's all good.
I feel like that should be a mandatory part of working together. Is like, hey, I've got to get one of the products. I just need a garage full of all the things we talk and work on.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Can you take a second, and for those who don't know or haven't thought about it this way, or they probably know their businesses really well, but they haven't really considered this term brand equity. Like, what is brand equity
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, and what do I do with that information as a business owner or a business leader?
Great question. So a way to think about brand equity, bottom line, and again, we go back to the Coca-Cola example, but there may be others. When there was in the 90s, people were saying that the brand was worth more than any other brand. It was the most highly valued brand, and the way that they would translate that, they would say is, if you look at the market capitalization of the company, so take all the existing stock in the marketplace, multiply it by the stock price, you're going to get the value, the market value of the company, right? Then if you took all and get your accountant or chief financial officer to do this to say, what's the value of all of the assets in my company from my balance sheet? The market capitalization minus the assets would give you the value of the brands. And we knew that Coca-Cola was the dominant brand there. And it turned out at the time, I think it was worth like $80 billion or something like that. Another way to think about it was if all of those buildings burned down and all those trucks burned down, and you said, hey, to a bank, I have the Coca-Cola brand, will you lend me money? The chances are they would quickly give you however much you needed because they realized that that brand was worth a lot in the minds of the consumer. So that's what we call brand equity. It's the way that think about it this way. An element of mind share, right? When someone says to you, what is the top three brands that come to your mind when I say carbonated soft drinks? Chances are you're going to say Coca-Cola is one of them, right? Because it occupies the mind of the consumer. And so that, in a sense, is the equity of the brand. And we used to talk about when I was at Coca-Cola, share of stomach. We wanted to be able to say, whenever you're thinking about a beverage, we want you to think about Coca-Cola and all the family of brands, family of products that we have underneath the Coca-Cola company. So it is all those attributes that come to mind when you think about a brand that make you love it. And a quick hierarchy: if no one knows you, that you have no awareness, you don't exist. So we start with awareness, then try the brand out. We all enjoy that experience at Costco and other places, and then preference, right? And then loyalty, then insistence, right? You go to a restaurant. May I have a Coca-Cola, please? They say, I'm sorry, we serve only Pepsi. Is that okay? And I say, no, because I'm brand insistent. Give me
It's
a
never
water.
okay.
Give me a lemonade. It's never okay. And then after that is advocacy, right? Now I'm saying, hey, Chandler, you ought to try this really cool product called Coca-Cola out, if you had never heard of it. And I'm going to advocate on behalf of the brand because I know that you're going to think very highly of it, and my brand equity with you is going to be enhanced because of the experience. And then I coined one, the last of the hierarchy. The rest of them come from lots of experts in the field of branding and marketing. But the last one is ownability. And what I'm saying there is, for the fanatics, they think the brand is theirs, and that the people that are managing the brand are stewards of the brand. And in fact, we are. So think about all those people that camp out outside of an Apple store, or all the people that threw up their arms and went crazy a couple of years ago when Bud Light did its thing with that whole
Yeah, Dylan something or another. Yeah,
Dylan Mulvaney, right?
Mulvaney,
Experience,
yeah.
right? Because they were like, wait a second, this is our brand. What are you doing with our brand? And I call that the ownability level. So yeah, that's where we're at in all of this.
Yeah. The thing that came to my mind there was that when I had my first business, which was a barbecue restaurant, we we had the choice to make between putting, Pepsi products in the store. We could put Coke products in the store. We could put craft soda in the store. There was a big craft soda movement at the
Yeah,
time.
sure.
Small bottlers all over the country were throwing out money trying to get people to go there. And I thought about it and I said, okay, what our brand represents, sort of the backyard cookout, bring your family over, you're hanging out at your fun uncle or aunt's house, everybody's invited to the neighborhood block party, that kind of thing was our brand. Which of these soda brands most closely aligns with that? And for me, it was the Coca-Cola brand, which was very helpful because for me, Pepsi's brand is more of like a younger party scene type thing. They've done a good job co-branding that. Craft soda was like for people that really cared about, I don't know, weird artisanness within everything in their life. So their pants were probably craft made, their hands, their jewelry's probably craft made. And that wasn't really us. And so I was like, okay, when people come in, they may not know us as a barbecue restaurant yet, but they're going to see the Coke soda fountain there, and they're going to immediately say, okay, I can kind of start to piece together what this thing is all about. And then the food reinforces that, and then hopefully we get all the way down to the bottom where we're both getting advocates and ownership over things. And it did work out really, really well. It was a very clearly aligned, like, okay, this brand is with us for this specific reason, and that worked out. The
Yeah, that's a great way of evaluating and making the choice. And if you've ever seen, which I'm sure you have, and everyone listening, any outdoor advertisement or even television advertisement, social media advertisement, many many times it's friends and family gathered around a meal, right? And barbecue is a big part of those meals. So
Well,
yeah,
in
good
in this
choice.
same vein, it's funny right now. Coca-Cola specifically is having this huge backlash because they released their famous Christmas ad, but it's all AI generated, and there's a lot of backlash to that. Going, okay, like robots aren't really part of the family yet, and so you may be 20, 30 years too early because we don't really love them like pets yet. And so you've essentially all we see with that is like, oh, you've taken away jobs of humans or whatever, and so like
Mm,
they're
mm,
they're having a little bit of a branding ownershipness mismatch
yes,
right now. I don't know if you've seen
yes.
that or you have any thoughts on that, but it's been interesting to read on.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point you raised because the Coca-Cola Caravan was a huge component of the holiday marketing, right? Back when I was even at Coca-Cola, and we created through the event licensing group, we created Coca-Cola Caravan merchandise, so replica trucks and all that sort of thing, and people love them. And yes, authenticity. You heard me say this word earlier, right? That is one of the core attributes of the Coca-Cola brand. So if you're not being authentic, at least in the mind of the consumer, then you've actually gone against the
Yep.
brand's attributes, and so that's probably not a smart move.
Well, Tim Cook is, I'm on record. I'm the biggest Tim Cook fan and hater at the same time. The current CEO of Apple at the time of
Yes,
this recording. Who knows
yes,
how much longer he'll be in there? And essentially, Tim Cook has done a great job of taking everything Steve Jobs did from a brand building standpoint, and he's operationalized it in a way and made it so efficient and squeezed every bit of equity out of that brand possible. And that's how they've gone from $300 billion business to over $1 trillion business. They may be over 2 trillion now. I'm not sure exactly. And they about 6 months ago released this ad with the iPad, and it's kind of an interesting creative ad where they have all of these different things an iPad can do. They have music, they have painting, they have computers and calculators, they have every analog thing on this giant hydraulic press. And the ad goes, and the hydraulic press comes down, and like it's 1984, but now Apple's the bad guys. They just mush all of the crap down, and it just breaks it all, and it's violent. And then the press lifts, and there's an iPad there. And you're like, I see what you guys were trying to do, showing how many cool features, which never works in marketing, features never work in marketing,
mm-mm.
go into this little product. But essentially, what you've told us all is like, hey, we're now the man. You've known that for a while, but now we're just reiterating it. And like, they had a huge backlash against it,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they've
I'm sure.
they've had to walk it back and do all the things. And so it's funny how no matter how big your brand is, an Apple or a Coca-Cola, you can still violate these principles, and like people will be pretty quickly to be like, hey, I don't identify with that. That's not part of who I am as a person. I'm not in your tribe for that reason. And they'll push back. And so whether you own $1 million brand or $100 million brand or $1 billion brand, like you better be really cognizant of this at all times. That's what I'm hearing you say. But on the
Yes.
scale side of things, I do have a question about who should look to this. Like, I'm assuming everybody should be brand cognizant and aware of that. But as far as it comes to like licensing things, like who's a good fit for that? Like, how big should you be in a mindshare position?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I covered that topic in Expand Grow Thrive, and I actually co-wrote a book called Strategic Brand Licensing, a textbook this year called Strategic Brand Licensing, because in my mind I said, I should have been able to take a course in business school on this, so that when I joined the worldwide licensing team, I knew what I was
Mm-hmm.
doing. And as I said to you, I had no idea. So my hope is, and Dr. Christina Longo, who co-wrote it with me, our hope is that this will get seeded into colleges and universities and into businesses globally, so that people can think about this and be able to, and to behave and, and with a knowledgeable understanding about it. But when we think about brands and what is a licensable brand, it has to meet certain criteria, right? One of them, which is just like bottom line, right, is this: has any company or companies, preferably more than one, approached you and said, I want to license your brand?
Is there
if they
demand?
if they haven't, then the likelihood that your brand is licensable is very low. And the sad thing is, a lot of times people are like, oh man, I can license my own name, identity, and likeness, or I've got this really cool thing, and surely people are going to want to buy it. So no, that's not a good reason to license or even attempt it. First off, I would say, let's be very pragmatic. How many people have approached you, with real
Mm-hmm.
companies, right? Like, one of the things that we would say is, anytime a company wanted to license our brand when I was at Rubbermaid, is, let's look at the due diligence. Or is this company going to be around many years after our licensing relationship is over? Because if anything goes sideways, we need to be able to look to them. But also, is their product best in class, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we wanted to enhance our brand, not diminish from our brand. So there's all that aspect of it. So if somebody did come to you, but they really didn't have a company, then you probably aren't licensable either. But the other part is just this idea that when somebody mentions the name of the brand, it immediately creates in the target audience's mind great feelings of, I would say, passion around what that brand stands for. So, Apple is an example. Yeti is another example. I'm just looking around my table. Coca-Cola is another. Some of the schools are others. When you think about a brand that is loved, right? And I would say we talked about that hierarchy, right? Loyalty, insistence, advocacy, ownability. It really has to be those categories and higher that people have to think about the brand on a high level. And probably those brands are licensable. And then the question is what categories they go in and who should be doing it. But
Mm.
the first criteria is, how many people have approached you about licensing your brand?
I actually have a good story for this. So my barbecue restaurant, Lyles Barbecue, is not a massive brand, but it was a really well-known brand in a specific market, which I think is what we're talking about here. Because if you're well-known across the world, like Coca-Cola, great. But if you're really well-known in Lexington, Kentucky, that's probably also really valuable if that's where all your revenue comes from. And so
Yeah.
we ended up doing a collaboration with a local brewery there who matched a lot of our brand guidelines from a, like, it's a good place to hang out. We believe a lot of the same things, yada, yada. And we did a smoked beer with them where we smoked their hops with hickory wood and all these other things. And then we did a
Love it.
co-branded, co-promoted thing. So it wasn't quite us licensing our product. There was no money exchanged hands, but it did put my logo up in their store, and we got to leverage some of their email marketing. And so even though we were a small brand at the time, we were still able to do some of these licensing things that you're talking about here, but we did it in a more creative, unique way to find a way to collaborate with somebody else that was a complementary to us. They didn't really compete with us, and then also they had the same customer base that we were trying to reach already. So
Perfect.
I do
Yeah.
think there's ways to do this even beyond just, hey, here's $1 million check minimum. I don't know if you've seen success in those sorts of things like
Oh,
that
for
as well.
sure. I love the VIK, value in kind aspect of things like that,
Mm,
because first off, you don't have to report any revenue, right? So there's no tax consequence. And I love what you were able to do with that, because it brought a new audience to you that probably loved what you were making. The word that came to mind as you were talking about, Lexington, Kentucky, or Louisville, Kentucky, and the passion is this idea of a cult following, right? It doesn't have to be big, but if there's that cult following, people are, let's say there was never any merchandise created, but they're creating merchandise around the brand and wearing that merchandise, then there probably are. These are folks that are just waiting for you to come up with something really cool that
Mm.
they could wear that they would be happy to pay for. And of course, the thinking with all of that is over deliver in the category of the product that you're creating for them so that the brand is enhanced and they're excited about wearing it, right?
Mm.
The worst thing, and we used to always say this to our colleagues when I was at Coca-Cola, is there's a huge difference between licensed merchandise and premium merchandise.
Mm.
Somebody throws away a t-shirt at let's say a sporting event like a college football game and I capture it, right? They shoot a cannon and I capture it. The the likelihood that that t-shirt is going to be durable, it's going to wear well, is designed well, has the right colors, all of those things is low, right? Because they're giving them away, and usually what happens is you wear that once and then you use it to wash your car. So
Yeah.
so have the company that makes the product deliver that wow experience to the consumer, right? It's
Mm.
like, oh my gosh, this material, it feels so incredible. It wears incredibly. It's designed incredibly. I love the type of material it's made out of. I love the design elements that are included in it that enhance the brand. Sometimes even with like Coca-Cola, the the the, the name of the font is called the Spencerian script, and you don't need to see the whole Coca-Cola name to know it's Coca-Cola. So understate things is a cool way of allowing people to wear the brand without feeling like they're a billboard for your brand. So
Mm.
those kind of things can make your brand much more attractive, and also enhance the equity. So yeah, I think those are things that matter. And whether it's a small group in your little town or it's a brand that's international, the metrics still apply.
Yeah, I mean, Coke has the famous story of when they went to design their green glass bottle. They said, this needs to be recognizable from a brand standpoint. If it's smashed on the ground, you should be able to look at it and say, that is a Coca-Cola bottle, and that's, I mean, it's iconic. We've seen tons of Coke ads where it's just the silhouette. I think that is actually their current TV ads that they're running now, where it's not even a Coke bottle; it's just a like enjoy happiness or something wraps around the bottle shape itself, and it's you don't ever see it. It's they use negative space to fill it in, and your
Yeah.
mind just sees it automatically, and that's a Coke bottle, and that's super powerful. And there's also the local element too. It reminded me of another funny story when I had the barbecue restaurant. There's a regional soda in Kentucky called Ale 81, and it is beloved in the state of Kentucky. Like you can't really get it outside of Kentucky. It's like Cheerwine in North Carolina. I know you said you were in the Carolinas for school, so you know Cheerwine. It's like
Yeah.
that. Very
Hmm.
popular regional soda. And we insisted on putting it onto our Coca-Cola machine, which came from the Coca-Cola company, which the sales rep who came in and gave us the machine was very unhappy about. And I said, you can take the machine if you want, but I'm leaving the local soda on there. And like, if you want me to put Pepsi in here or pay for my own machine, God forbid, I'll do that. And they were like, it's fine, just leave it. And then, but again, it was like people wanted, like, it was such a cool thing. People were like, oh, you have Ale 81 on tap. It was so unique. And it was so in line with the local brand of what it meant to be a Lexington, Kentucky native, that it helped us out as a company as well. So I do agree with you that whether you're doing it in a local scale or a larger scale, that makes a lot of sense. So I know we're almost out of time here. I got to ask you about what I think are the greatest licensors of all time, and just get your broad thoughts and like, what is it too much or too little? My buddy Austin, who's the co-founder here at High Beam, is a massive Kiss fan. Goes to all the concerts all the time. And I got to tell you, he told me the story one time. He went to this like estate sale of this guy who used to be a manager for Kiss, and this dude had a house full of Kiss licensed crap. And like, there's no other way to describe it because they will put their brand on
On anything
everything.
and
Do you
everything.
think there's some benefit to just like blitzkrieg, where it's like we're just gonna hit it all everywhere all the time like they do, or is that kind of the bit now where it's like it's so much now that it's sort of funny and it's accepted by the group and it doesn't hurt their brand anymore? Like, oh, there's Kiss Cheerios, that's cool.
Yeah, I think great point and great example. I think what you're saying is the way they've gone about marketing their brand into every category is now define the category or
Mm-hmm.
define the brand, right? Before it might have been, this pop brand of the 80s, or whatever Kiss was really at its at peak. And it appealed to a certain genre. But now, if they're on everything, then it's like, okay, that is acceptable and understood for Kiss. But at the time, I would have been saying, okay, what do we stand for? What is the thing that matters most to us? Let's focus on that. And you see this also like with other brands, like the Star Wars brand. There was a point where it was like on toaster ovens and things like that. I'm like, this has nothing to do with what the brand stands for.
Mm-hmm.
But they are seeing this, and again, maybe it's the company that's responsible for the licensing of the brand is one main metric is driving royalty revenue, and so they're not concerned about how that relates to the brand's attributes, and so it's just like, oh, I can get another 200,000 there, and another 100,000 there, and another 50,000 there, and yeah, it probably detracts from the brand, but look, I just brought in another $2 million worth of royalty revenue, and I would say that's bad for the brand, but I'm not the one that's just making the decisions.
I'm fairly certain that it's Gene Simmons that handles all of the licensing, or Gene Simmons' company that he runs that handles all
Yeah,
the licensing. And if you asked him what KISS stood for, I'm pretty sure he would say making money. And I think he'd
yes,
probably say it tongue in cheek, but I
yeah.
think his actions show that that is actually what he wanted that band to do. So I love that. That's great. I can't wait to clip that out and send it to my buddy Austin. He's gonna die a little on the inside, I think. So well, Pete, man, I appreciate you joining me today. We always end every episode with a big ask. You've been so generous with your time and your wisdom and your advice. Like, please take this moment to tell you how we can support you and what we can do for you.
Well, thank you. First off, this has been a blast. I love talking about this stuff. I love talking to people who know the space really well. And Chandler, you're in your wheelhouse, and so that made it really fast and enjoyable. For me, it's just I love helping others develop their brands, and find out what makes their brand so unique and important and relevant to their target audience, and helping them find it, find that target audience so that they can get their needs met. And then when they have established brands, I love helping them figure out what categories they should go into and how they should consider choosing their business partners so that they have a long-term relationship with them. And that's what strategic brand licensing is all about, is this idea that there's plenty of licenses that have been longer than 10 years. The one that we end with is the the one between Nike and Michael Jordan for the Air Jordan brand, which is now in its 40th year, and Michael Jordan hasn't played for 20 years in the NBA.
Even got a
And
movie.
so, and he's got a movie, and it's just incredible, and people love the brand, and that's because it is still relevant. So, um, please just get my message out there to people that can help. My website is PeteCanalichio.com. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and I like to write blog articles typically once a week where I talk about things like this, but also talk about who I am, and so people know me at a deep level. And if the combination of that sounds interesting to you, I would say please reach out. I'd love to have a conversation, and if nothing else, give you some pointers. But ultimately, would love to work with you.
Yeah, Pete, I echo all of that stuff. I think the blog is great. I've really enjoyed reading it since I found it recently, and I've just enjoyed getting to know you, man. I appreciate you joining
Thank
me
you.
today. I appreciate everybody that's given us this time and listened to this episode. We will see y'all next week.